Good afternoon and welcome to the Foster Swift Sports Talk podcast. I'm your host, Dave Russell, alongside my two co-hosts, Charlie Sarche and Tony Delamonte. Today, we're pleased to be joined by Stephen Bienko. He's a former football player and track and field athlete at Villanova University, turned life coach and business executive. He's the co-founder and CEO of 42U, a company focused on helping student athletes build long-term personal brands and their name, image, and likeness. He attended the United States Air Force Academy, Villanova University, as I just stated, and also attended Dartmouth and went to business school there. He's a former New Jersey State Trooper, so he's kind of done it all. Stephen, thanks so much for joining us today.
This is awesome. Looking forward to chatting with you guys. Nothing like being surrounded by a couple of attorneys and being pegged with questions. So looking forward to this.
It's our favorite thing to do. So first off, can you kind of, I know I kind of gave a little synopsis of 42U, but can you give us a deeper dive into what exactly that is?
Yeah, I think what's most important is that try to be a good entrepreneur and see what's coming, and that formulates what actually is. And I saw kind of NIL in the athletic space unlock opportunity, but expose this lack of identity. And as a former student athlete and someone that dabbled in multiple businesses over the last 25, 30 years in the areas of performance, leadership, decision-making, kind of what I saw with NIL was simple. Athletes were becoming brands overnight, like just instantly, but in the background, no one was really helping them understand themselves. So you saw a lot of commotion around pushing the financial aspect or the brandability aspect of young student athletes, but the foundation wasn't there. Money was flying in and everybody wanted to jump in, and from tech platforms to what I call new age agents, to GM roles that make decisions that were never there before. But I saw the real commodity was being forgotten and still sort of kind of taken advantage of, right? And I'm being careful with that a little bit there. And I mean the athlete as the commodity and still being taken advantage of. Not to mention, while this was all happening in its own little bubble, there's this revolution that's happening on the outside, this little two-letter word called AI, and it was creeping up on us. I always laugh. It's like the sports management world took on the face of politics and began playing look at the shiny objects over here, while the real movement was happening below the surface where no one was looking. So we built 42U to try to assist in solving that, at least at the athlete level. And we developed the human behind the athlete, the identity, the decision-making, the performance under pressure, and then translate that into brand, NIL, and life after sport.
So expand on that a little bit. Do you identify athletes who, have opportunities to improve their brand? I think back to the NCAA tournament where we saw the Boozer commercial about 1,000 times, and Trey McKinney's Geico commercial is running in the championship game. Obviously those guys are sort of in a category of their own, but how does 42U sort of unlock that potential and help athletes sort of get to that next level of branding and, potential financial opportunities?
Real cool question. This stuff we see on the outside is so exciting. And it's wonderful for sports in general, for the athletes, for the universities. But us as 42U, we're not in the marketplace, we're the infrastructure. So most platforms in that world, and we don't even like to say, we're not in the NIL space. We just came about because that three-letter word brought such chaos and change. And when there's chaos, there's opportunity. But most platforms sit on top of NIL. We sit underneath it. So in that Boozer example, right, we're behind the development of what the Boozer identity actually is, not what's just assumed. And so we're using psychological data, development systems that help athletes understand how they think, how they perform, and lead, and start building structured brands for a long-term value basis. right? For us, it's not about the deal. It's about building an asset, the personal brand. And that's where we're at today. And everyone should be, in my humble opinion, everybody should be building a personal brand. So in this new generation, why not start infiltrating that with the demographic that is the in next line to be the power agents, and that's today's college athlete.
So when you say building a personal brand, do you mean only on social media or in their ability to carry themselves as individuals?
Well, we realize that social media is such a large aspect of our life. So let's leave that up there for a little bit, because social media is here and it's here to stay in some type of format. We don't have to go down that rabbit hole too deep, but the social media we know today is probably not going to act the same way that it has in the next 2 to 3 years because of the growth of AI. But the personal brand is really about the identity. And that's the most important next step, because when we move into this next revolution of an AI dominant field where agents or bots are doing a lot of the hard skill work, that old school notion of really knowing who we are and what our identity actually is becomes the foundation for our employment. It becomes the foundation for understanding, right? We're gonna have the most amount of entrepreneurs that we've ever had in the history of, let's just say, the United States of America. And it's not going to be so much of what we hear now, oh, my side hustle, right? We're going to formulate an entirely new group of entrepreneurs where it's going to become extremely valuable to know who you are, what you represent, and what type of people are drawn to you. It's also going to be most important in the hiring basis, right? As a law firm, right? It's going to shrink down the amount of, hey, how much do you really need to know about law and how much can you actually decipher, communicate, and engage with clients and with the law firm itself? Does your identity actually fit our identity and how we move about? So these are some other high-level topics to communicate about, but that's what I mean about building that personal brand and the importance of really understanding who you are.
So, Stephen, are student athletes coming to you, you're contracting with them directly and you're helping them build that brand? Can you kind of explain that?
Absolutely. Well, we're contracting with the universities themselves. So the university athletic departments are hiring us in order to support their end user, which is the student athlete.
Interesting. So I noticed that 42U works in particular with a lot of Big Ten programs. Is that on purpose? Is there any particular reason why it's a majority Big Ten programs right now?
Yes and no. Let's take this back a little bit. So the Big Ten is such an incredible conference because of what the universities represent at their core. The Big Ten is obviously, let's not even play jokes around it. There's the Ivy League, then there's the Big Ten. Plain and simple. The Big Ten's institutions are high-valued academic institutions, and they've been known for that for many years. Now the Big Ten, obviously in this last year, 2026, they are the athlete conference as well, right? Winning the football national championship, the women's and the men's national championship. They are the conference to be. So we just felt that in our growth, if we can settle into the schools of the Big Ten that truly have an identity of being strong academic, predominantly state institutions, then we're going to learn so much about our value proposition along the way.
And I think, too, to your point, we are fans of Big Ten teams here. We're based in Lansing. I'm a Michigan guy. Yep. I think the emergence of NIL, favors the Big Ten in a lot of ways. I think economically, the Big Ten schools have, a huge alumni bases. They're located in areas where it sort of fosters that. But I did want to ask about, you talked about identity, and I think one of the things that comes to mind is authenticity as well. I feel like when I watch athlete interviews or, things, if someone comes across as authentic, I think that's powerful, and it's a reminder that, hey, you're a person, and I might like you, sort of thing. Is that something that you guys are focused on as well?
Oh, that's the core competency of it, because without understanding your identity, there is no authenticity. Authenticity begins with a true understanding, right? The word authenticity has been thrown around so much, and it's sort of a token word, but it's that question of that Malcolm Gladwell question. Well, what does it really mean? And how are you authentic when the majority of us, I can speak for myself. I didn't know who the heck I was until I was at least 36, 37 years old. I don't know about you all, but I didn't know until that stage of life. I was one confused individual. Everything was great on the outside, or at least it was perceived that way. But I was confused as all heck. My identity was still stuck my identity was still stuck as being an athlete until I was 36, 37 years old. Think about all those years. I'm still thinking that I'm an athlete. So you can say as much as I wanted to say that I understood the direction I was going, or I understood who I was, but I really was just living the perception of who I thought I was supposed to be. And that's the pattern recognition of years of being an athlete. And I'm sure all of us, including you guys, all have your own pattern recognitions from how you grew up, where you grew up, who grew you up, what schools you went to, and what you did, and what traumatic events happened in your life. Right. So you might identify with, hey, this is who I am. Is it really? And how much have we really questioned that before? And so that's where we jumped into this conversation when it comes to the trueness of authenticity. We heard that so much in the social media world. Way back before 42U, I had a social media agency, so we constantly heard that word. And I remember saying to our team, can we stop saying that? Because none of us really know what that actually is. What is authentic? Right? Is authentic just shooting your mouth off and saying whatever you want to say? Or is authentic truly understanding what you represent, who you are, and then attaching your voice to that and partnering with other voices that are aligned? And so when I think about that, the struggles of, the evolving university, is that a lot of times they're building for that external, but the missing piece is that internal layer, right? What's missing isn't more deals per se, it's better infrastructure of understanding. And right now, most universities are building outward collectives and partnerships and, subscribing to different marketplaces, but they're still underdeveloped internally. And I mean underdeveloped with the development, the holistic development of the mind of the student athlete. So listen, but I'm not an athletic director or an administrator. And I'm not bound by the stresses that they incur on a regular basis. But from my little seat here and the microphone that I'm behind, what I see missing is a true understanding of how athletes think, how they process pressure, how they make decisions, and how they lead from within authentically. Without this, in the university system, without this kind of knowledge, you're recruiting and developing blindly to the traits that actually determine long-term success. So I think in the university, sometimes athletes are being handed opportunities without even being taught how to evaluate them properly, authentically. Schools, they need these structured systems to help athletes align their choices with their identity, their brand, and that all then correlates to long-term outcomes, long-term success, and not just short-term gain.
So you must work with schools that you're like, okay, they just get it, and other schools that you're probably like, okay, they really don't get it. So the schools they're doing, in your opinion, in the right way right now, what is it that they're doing in particular?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say we go around saying schools are doing it right and schools are not doing it right. I think we like to say they get it, and it excites us. Right? When we see a university that gets it, or we see a personnel inside of a university that gets it. Like, I'll give an example. Carrie Locke over at Rutgers University, right? She heads up what they call Scarlet Knights for Life. And in that sector, it's student development, life after sport. She gets it. And it's not saying the next individual that's leading a university is doing it wrong. We just get excited when someone just naturally understands the value of the administrative role that they hold and they get it. And so those of individuals at this beginning stage, right, in this sort of chaotic stage, there's a lot of learning to do. There's a lot of education. When you're building a business that hasn't been built yet, a lot of that goes into play, educating individuals, educating the community, at least trying to open the minds of, hey, this is important, this is valuable. Because it's like anything else, right? When we're in these positions, we follow the trends that we think are important. And sometimes we do it blindly. And it's not our fault, right? We're patterned to think that way. We've been schooled that way from the very beginning of our time, right? We've been schooled the American corporate way. Sit, listen, follow, take the test, do it this way, and then follow that on to college and follow these paths. Well, I'm going to jump in here and say, first of all, AI is going to throw all that on its head. And I can't wait to see the redevelopment of the education system. But we're patterned to think that way. And so we get into our jobs, we're patterned to think, hey, this is the method I should follow. So it's exciting when we have an opportunity, something new and a new way of thinking, to begin communicating and exploring this with individuals that at some of the universities that inherently just get it. And so when we're speaking this to them, they're just smiling and getting excited and like, hey, let's institute this immediately within our programs.
So, Stephen, what does that process look like? Let's say you start working with a new university. What does the day-to-day look like from day one of you working with them to maybe the end of the first year?
Yeah, so on a business level, we go in and we go team by team. And generally, we start at the university level. We like to start with what's called SAC, the Student Athlete Advisory Council. So each major university, pretty much most universities, have some variation of SAC. And let's call it your Student Athlete Board of Governors, right, for argument's sake. And we like to start with that group. The reason being is that at a university, that group represents a small microcosm of all the different sports at that university. So you're going to have 3 to 4 members of the football team. You're going to have 2 to 3 members of the field hockey team. You're going to have 2 members of the wrestling team, right? You're going to have 4 members of the women's basketball team. And these are individuals who want to be there. Right? They want to be, it's not based upon your athletic ability. It's based upon, hey, I'm a student athlete and I'm also interested in leadership. I'm also interested in being a resource to my team, to my community, and to my school. And so we like to start with them. And we go in, we do a short presentation, and then we begin collecting information and data from the students. Following that, we then produce what we call our branding kit. And it becomes the visual identity of the athlete. And for the first time, for many of the student athletes, it's their first time where someone said, they're like, oh my gosh, this is me. This is what I've been trying to tell people or trying to explain. And one of the cool results is we asked this question. So who did you share it with first? I tell you guys, it's amazing that you get 21-year-olds or 20-year-olds saying, I sent it to my mom and dad. It's one of those like aha moments, like, wow, you sent it to your parents? It's because, hey, mom, dad, this is me. This is who I am. And I proudly now want to represent this. And so from there, then we kind of move on to the different teams and we go team by team until we've gone through all the different teams at universities, because then now we have a real collective information, real collective data points. And now we have this information data collectively on the awareness, decision-making, leadership traits, true data-based information on all the athletes at the university.
Kind of on what you mentioned, do you ever get any, I guess, maybe not pushback, but hesitancy from some of the athletes thinking, well, I don't want to put something out there because it's too cringy or, uncomfortable putting their face out onto social media, because some people like it and, not everyone wants or sort of desires that.
That's a really, really good question, right? Obviously, when you're dealing with generational gaps, right, and that's where on a business level, we're making sure that we have people within our business model that understand the generational gaps, right? I'm a Gen Xer. I sure naturally, because of my children, I have a better understanding of Gen Z and Gen Alpha. But, the way you were brought up is completely different. So on a business level, we're going to have individuals that may understand that a lot more. However, I do want to clarify, we are not all about social media by any stretch. Right? We are not an NIL company. We're not a social media company. We're a company that engages in identity understanding. And so we're basically pulling out those true transferable skills, the skills that make you a great athlete. Remember, guys, athletics is 80% mental, 20% physical. And when you're at that level of division, let's just call it Division I, there are such small gaps in the true athletic ability. Right? You have your 1% outliers, right? Where you have your Jeremiah Smiths or you have your Paige Beckers. Those are the 1% outliers. The majority of student athletes, the differentiating on a physical level are very minimal. Where the drastic differences are is their mental abilities while playing. Now, what we're doing, because every playing field has different situations that are in need of different mental attributes. And we extract those value points because those same mental attributes that make an athlete strong are the true transferable skills when they're moving on to their life after sport. Well, let me run that back even that small 1% of student athletes that have the grace and ability, or sometimes the luck, to move on and play sport professionally and make some sort of a living out of it. Even for them, because remember, when you step out of the university level, athletics is now a job. It's no longer a sport. So that is your career. And so when you're in your career, how are you building your career? I need to extract my true transferable skills, because when I'm stepping on the NFL field, yes, I'm playing, but I'm a business. And I need to understand what makes me a valuable business person, or what makes my business valuable, because that valuable aspect is tied to their identity, which is tied to their business model, their personal business model. And we want to extract that data and that information. So we'll be able to tell for you guys. Let me lay this out for you guys as attorneys. Right? There's a major difference between, obviously, a litigator and a real estate contract attorney. It's a major difference, right? There's a major difference in not the law, right? There's different law points, or not just the understanding of the law, but your application of the law, the way your one mind works versus the way another mind works. And that's an interesting abstract to pull. Well, we can do that. So, for example, you have a men's soccer player, hypothetically, from Clemson University. Actually, we'll take about hypothetically from Michigan State. Okay. And he wants to become an attorney. We can actually dissect, based upon his true transferable skills in the field, what makes him a strong striker in soccer. We can extract that, and we can now determine, would you be a very good litigator, or would you be a strong business corporate attorney, based upon the skills that we now know of what makes, because we also have the data on the high performing attorneys and what has made them high performing attorneys, what mental psychological traits have made them high performing attorneys. So you start matching these all together, we can start showcasing that athlete and pointing them in the right direction.
So what if they don't know what career they'd want to do after their playing career is done? Can you kind of point them in a direction that you think they might benefit from based on the data that you gather?
Yes, awesome question. So now we're basing upon their major, right? So we have two we have 2 points that we take. So we're taking information based upon their major, and we're taking information based upon if they have a career direction. If they don't, if they're undecided, we're using all the basis points on their major itself. And that becomes a little broader, right? Sometimes we're working with a freshman versus working with a senior. And that's why in our business model, we're working with the universities over a long-term basis with the student athlete, because what's important to that freshman changes obviously drastically between their freshman year and senior year. Wait, we like to say those first 2 years, freshman and sophomore, you're still under the microscope of the patterned teachings environment of your parents and your upbringing. When you get past that sophomore year and now you're in your junior and senior year, now you're a product of your own environment that you've been in now while in college. Things change drastically. So we also re-engage the athlete at that particular time. But for the purpose of that question, we're going to use the major as our source of data points, and then we're going to tighten that up even further when they're older and they may have more of a clear direction of what their layers of interest are.
So your value to the school has to be tremendous in the sense that the money you're talking, or you haven't talked about any money, but to the extent that you're building a brand for an athlete and they're able to, monetize that through NIL, those monies would be non-revenue share money. We'd be talking about third-party type deals, marketing deals. Do I have that right?
Yes, 85%. Yes, you have that right. And we hope we're adding value to universities. We think we are, and we hope they really recognize that, and more do over the course of time. But there's 2 different areas there, right? We really believe in this next shift when it comes to revenue sharing. Right? This is very interesting, guys. The revenue sharing model right now is purely based upon someone's athletic ability. And talking about a model that is not fully baked, that's the revenue share model. And where we find there is a gap is that in the world of athletics, before the revolution of NIL, it was just about the scholarship. And that great goal was, hey, I got a scholarship to college. And when you think about that monetarily, nobody ever spoke about that money. There was money there, but it was like monopoly money. You never saw it. It wasn't real to the general population. Obviously, in the backbone of a university, some donor gave a donation, or accumulation of donors donate to the university to support the scholarships. But it was never talked about as a monetary value. Well, when the revenue model shift came in, now this cap of 20.5 million now opened the door to it being real money being transferred. Because it's not only money that let's be honest, many of the universities don't even have, because their athletic departments are operating in the red, but that's a whole nother rabbit hole to go down. So you open up 20.5, wait, where's that money coming from? However, okay, let's just say it's there. Now this is coming directly from our balance sheets and P&Ls. Now, this is coming up in budget conversations. The old monopoly money was not really coming up in that way. Now somebody's job is being attached to that model. That's an entirely different conversation, guys. So you can't be wrong anymore. You used to be able to be wrong about the scholarship, but now if you're paying an athlete, let's just make it easy, $150,000, that $150,000 is coming against a cap. That's part of our P&L. We can't lose that money. So the conversation becomes different. And so when we're looking at that, hey, what are we really evaluating here? Are we just evaluating based upon stars or what some reporter says or what a coach's basic evaluation is on the athletic ability? Or are we really looking at a developmental process of who has a higher percentage chance of being successful based upon their physical and their mental attributes? And I don't mean the mental attributes of, hey, I think he's a good guy, or I met his family, they're great people, or I checked in with the local janitor at his high school and he checks out at being a great guy. That doesn't cut it anymore. That is so 20 years ago. Shoot, that's how they recruited when I was coming through, and that's 35 years ago. You're instilling the same patterns of recognition when now you're in a crunch and a battle financially and structurally. There needs to be a major change in this. And so we're offering that change. We're offering the identity portion. So an athlete can be determined, hey, does this individual have a higher percentage or a higher ceiling of performing at the highest levels under pressure? We can begin evaluating in that type of process.
So are you helping, like, sorry, Charlie, if a school has a GM or, a recruiting coordinator, are you actually working with those individuals prior to signing someone or offering?
We're trying to convince them that, hey, guys, here are the new data points that you should be interested in. And we're knocking on doors. It's not easy. It's not easy changing patterns of thought. But we're here, we're trying to learn, we're trying to talk to the smartest minds in the world of performance, of psychology, and really trying to learn, hey, what are the most important metrics that are needed? Right? Because we're in an evolution of data in sports. Data is the most important aspect. When you have general managers, when you have head coaches that are being hired because they're great data analysts in today's world, recognize that shift. So we're trying to learn which GMs are thinking in that way and are willing to use that type of data, because they're entirely different data points that are generally used. I mean, shoot, we've been working off height, weight, 40 time, the length of someone's hand. And obviously, guys, we've proven those metrics wrong over and over and over again. Athletes have proven those metrics wrong. Or those ways of thought. We just haven't decided to put that to the side a little bit and start taking on some new measurables that actually move the dial.
So if Tom Izzo and Dusty May were with us on this podcast today, what would be your pitch to them?
Do you want the real data points who can help you determine who's going to perform and who's worth investing in? If you want those data points so you are wrong less than you are right, and it doesn't just take your thinking mind, then our information is valuable to you.
I think that's a really good point, too, because we just wrapped up the NFL draft, and you hear all the time that, sure, the GMs and the coaches will watch the combine, but the things that matter are, one, the tape, and then two, the interviews. They want to know what they're buying. They want to know everything about you. And so I don't think we're there yet in college athletics, but like you mentioned, jobs are on the line. And, if you get a kid wrong or a transfer wrong, I mean, there's real consequences to it. And so I think, what you mentioned is really helpful, and every data point is important for schools and universities.
I love that you brought that up. All right, but here's going to be my challenge on this one. I'm a massive, listen, I say me, but who am I? I'm just this little guy sitting in New Jersey, but I do have my opinion, and I'm sitting on this show to talk about it. So let's dive into that. We're using, and that is the method that should be used, right? You should do those deep dive interviews, those conversations, right? Really engage with the athlete, right? That's how you're going to learn who's going to be a valuable asset to your franchise. Same thing in hiring. Right? If you're going to hire a new attorney, great. You went to Harvard, you got a law degree from Harvard, but do you fit our firm? Like, we really need to ask you some deep questions, because the information is the information, but how you think and how you operate is 100 times more important than just the factual knowledge you learned at a specific institution. Okay, so how does that cross over? Well, a coach interviewing a young student athlete is still just a biased human, like we all are. All of us have our biases. If you don't think you have biases, that's the first bias that you have. It's a bias to think that you're not biased. We are all biased in some way based upon what we've grown up and and what's been around us. We don't even realize the biases we have. So when you're interviewing and talking to athletes in this format, yes, you can come out of a meeting thinking, hey, I love this kid. He's great. I guarantee you the majority of that is just because he fit your biases and he checked off the boxes. And there's an assortment of biases that we have. Okay. And if without acknowledging that, are you really getting what you need, or are you getting the answers you want to hear? And when you have factual data, this is where you start using the same mind that Curt Cignetti has naturally. So let me flip this to you all. You're going to find a lot of coaches trying to duplicate what Curt Cignetti does. 99% of them will fail. And I don't mean fail as in get an F. I mean, they will not be able to do what Curt Cignetti does. Why? Well, because Curt Cignetti, his mind operates in a completely different platform than 99% of college coaches. He thinks differently because of his makeup, naturally, not by training, by birth. His mind sees things differently. His mind seems to, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a doctor, I have not diagnosed him, but his mind seems to operate naturally without preconceived biases. And so for him, he's able to see an athlete for exactly what he needs logically. Not what he thinks he's supposed to have, or not what looks good on paper, or not what they feel they should believe because what everybody else says. He goes based upon 100% pure black and white logic. And that's why he's so successful. And so to be able to duplicate that, you need a systematic approach. He has the mind to do it, but most of us don't have that. And so if you take that as an example, and that's how we're trying to infiltrate the other GMs and other coaches, is that if we can give you the tools that somebody like Curt Cignetti has naturally, how much of a better recruiter can you be? How much a better evaluator can you be? How much better will your retention be? And how much will you win more?
Yeah, so Stephen, that was kind of my question to piggyback off that. Is it seems like with the introduction of NIL, everything has shifted down now to the high school level. I mean, we're seeing middle schoolers getting involved at camps early, recruiting happening earlier and earlier for at least big time recruits. I know you guys are working with universities directly. Have you thought about working directly with high schools as well? And maybe starting with, some of those like top 20 high schools in the country that are constantly producing, 4 or 5 star talent.
100%. On a business level, it's been communicated about. We've done some beta testing around it. I live in that world with my children being athletes, being in the high school world and leveled and lower the middle school world. So as a founder, as a business owner in this space, I'm living it and watching it and breathing it day by day. And so I'm seeing the need, right? However, we wanted to really engage ourselves at that collegiate level first, and then have a real understanding for what's needed, because then we can begin learning and then producing at the high school level for what's really needed at the university level and what information they really need. Because in the way a college athlete communicates and what kind of questions they can be engaged with is completely different than what kind of questions a high school athlete, student athlete can engage and understand. That's just reality. So we want to really know what's valuable and what's important at the collegiate level. And then, yes, when it comes to the core holistic competency, hey, the earlier we can have our children truly understand who they are, especially in this world, whether it's social media or it's the confusion of AI, what's real and what's not, the closer we can get to them in their educational journey and have them truly understand their identity, their purpose, their value, and what they really represent, the better off our children are going to be. So when it comes down to when you build a company, right, first should be what good am I doing? And then based upon what good am I doing as our core competency, how can we then scale that so that we can provide for more? In that providing more in a capitalistic mindset, we are making more. And at our core competency, how do we help young people truly understand so that their life trajectory can be better with and we can help one little small piece of their life and help them catapult themselves in a strong direction.
Would you agree that it goes beyond just helping them with wins and losses? When I think of NIL, I always think of what would have Johnny Manziel been like during the NIL time frame? Think of
Denard Robinson.
Think how much money he would have made, or he did make, for Texas A&M that he never saw, because of that persona that he had. I mean, sure, he won a lot of games, but it went a lot farther than that.
So obviously, when we're talking about, we love college sports, and college sports is entertaining. But the core competence of what college sports represents is an extension of our education. And I'll hold tight to that. And I'll battle anybody on it, regardless of, because I truly believe in the statement that college sports is not a business, but there is business in college sports. The foundation of college sports is an extension of the educational system. And when we really truly understand that, we can still do all the great things on the outside. The athletes can actually make even more money and set themselves up for more growth if we really focus on, hey, NIL opened the door to wake us up to how are we educating our college student athletes? Are we still educating the same way we've been educating for 30 years, or have we really advanced? And have we opened our eyes up enough? Because when you're building NIL, you're building personal brands. You're building identity. You're building an understanding of how you impact others and how others can impact you. Those are real core competencies that have to be observed and have to be represented at the university level. So yes, when we're building NIL, it's bigger than that. And the universities, and that is a major difference between, if you're looking at a large universities versus a small universities, right? The Power Five versus a MAC mid-major. That's the real difference in them, is that the MAC and mid-majors, they have the underlying business ability to actually focus on development, identity clarity, stronger cultural alignment, because they're not under those bright lights of production now, money now, return on investment now. And when you talk to some of those mid-majors who are running NIL departments, I love hearing them because they really are focused on those attributes, right? Those Power Five schools have money, but the smaller schools have clarity, right? The power programs can drive volume and dollars, and it might service them for the very short term, but they shouldn't fall asleep at the wheel, because the long-term objective is providing that long-term value for the student athlete. That's not just the holistic and right way of doing it, but that's also the capitalistic way of doing it. The more you instill in that student athlete now, the more that's going to come back to them later in the future. Because if they're penetrating that athlete in a way that creates long-term value, they are increasing their percentage of the number of athletes who turn around and then donate, participate, and support that university years later down the road.
This has been great. If there's any, I know you, I'm sure you have lots of advice for athletes, high school or college out there, but if there was one piece of advice you'd want to give to someone who's listening, who either might be going into college or sort of finding their way and starting this whole process that, you were a college athlete, what would that be?
If I'm just speaking to the younger generation or parents of, young student athletes, let's just focus on the social aspect. Followers don't equal value. Clarity does. Let me say that again. Followers don't equal value. Clarity does. And athletes should really start thinking of, it's not about more posts. More posts doesn't equal more deals, right? More followers doesn't equal more money. Sometimes some of this can be true in the marketplace, but the reality, brands want consistency. They want trust and alignment. And those same brands that want that same learning is what is going to be wanted when it comes to life after sport. Companies want consistency, trust, and alignment, right? They don't just want that quick spark in the pan. They don't just want the resume that makes you look good, right? And your personal brand is not content. Your personal brand is decision-making, communication, and identity. And I think if you're speaking to that younger demographic, I think that's, some of the most important attributes. And if I can evolve on one other area, for speaking to the sports world overall, the college sports world overall, administrators, brands that are aligning themselves on. Women's sports aren't catching up. They've already caught up. And they're becoming much more efficient at creating real brand value. And the overall attention is fragmenting, and that's actually favoring women's sports, because for a long time, honestly, college sports has been that male-led economy driven by media deals, football revenue, and institutional priorities. And that has shaped where the money flows. And that's not necessarily where the value was. And you can read between the lines how that happens. But NIL is exposing something extremely different here. And women athletes are often, and a lot of times, outperforming in the areas that actually matter to brand. And that's engagement rates, audience trust, things like consistency and content, and truly authentic brand alignment, right? And so we're seeing that across the board. Women athletes frequently generate higher engagement on social platforms than their male counterparts. So the wake-up call is right there. When you're looking at, hey, how am I really going to expand my overall footprint of the intellectual property of my university? Your female student athletes have that link. And so while men's sports might lead the way in legacy and those kind of dollars, women's sports are definitely becoming more efficient at building modern brand equity.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been great. And if someone wants to reach out to you, if AD wants to reach out to you, how do they do that?
I think the best way is LinkedIn. I love LinkedIn. We actually just developed a nice partnership with LinkedIn of infiltrating the universities that truly want to engage. So I think LinkedIn, that's Stephen Bienko. That's the best possible way.
Well, great, Stephen. We really enjoyed this and wish you the best of luck. And hopefully we can have you back on again in the future.
I love it. Great job, guys. I appreciate being on.
Thanks, Stephen.
Thanks, Stephen.